Every emotion you feel is a chemical record of the past, and when you're entangled in a relationship with someone who manipulates your emotions, your brain begins to wire and fire in patterns that aren't even yours. But what if today you woke up and chose a different future? See, you didn't attract the narcissist because you're broken. You attracted the narcissist because your soul is ready to heal. And healing starts with awareness. So today, let's talk about 5 unmistakable signs you're dealing with a narcissist so you can reclaim your power, reset your energy, and start living as the most authentic version of you. Let's go deep. They come into your life like a spark, magnetic, captivating, as if the universe finally delivered what your soul was aching for. And in the beginning, they mirror everything you wanted to see, your dreams, your values, even your deepest wounds. They don't just listen, they study. They analyze your emotional landscape with the precision of a surgeon. And then, slowly, they begin to weave themselves into your nervous system. It feels like love, it feels like destiny. But what you don't realize, what your body starts to sense before your mind can comprehend, is that what you're actually experiencing is an illusion crafted by a master of manipulation. A narcissist doesn't lead with cruelty. They lead with charm. They intoxicate you with validation. They create moments of intensity that cause your brain to release dopamine and oxytocin, bonding chemicals that make you feel euphoric. But it's not connection, it's control. They begin to test your boundaries by withdrawing affection when you need it most. One day you're on a pedestal, the next you're ignored, criticized, or punished with silence. And your nervous system, it goes into chaos, trying to make sense of this inconsistency. You start working harder, giving more, just to get back to that fleeting version of them who made you feel seen. But that version never truly existed. It was a projection, a performance. And now you're addicted to the emotional high, chasing a ghost. This is where the brain starts to rewire itself in unhealthy ways. You're no longer living in the present moment. You're living in the past of who they were and the future of who they might be again, but you're disconnected from your now. And every time they pull you close and then push you away, they reinforce a trauma bond, a loop that your body begins to interpret as normal, as love. You start doubting your intuition, you second guess your reactions. Your body tells you something is wrong, but your mind is so entangled in their version of reality, you override your own inner truth. And that's exactly where they want you, emotionally uncentered, energetically disoriented. Because when you're in survival mode, you're easy to control. You're easy to influence. You stop asking, is this person safe? And start asking, what did I do wrong? There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when you start realizing that every conversation seems to twist itself around you, not because you're the center, but because somehow, no matter what happens, you end up at fault. They lie and you question your memory. They lash out and you wonder if you provoked them. They withdraw affection and you scramble to do better. This is not coincidence. This is the architecture of psychological control. When someone is unwilling or incapable of taking responsibility, they become architects of distortion. They shift blame with surgical precision, constructing stories that protect their ego at the expense of your sanity. And when you are deeply connected to that person, your mind begins to bend to accommodate their version of reality. You shrink your truth to fit their narrative. You begin to internalize shame that was never yours to carry. It's not that they lack awareness, it's that accountability threatens their fragile sense of identity. To admit fault is to admit flaw, and in the world of a narcissist, flaw is intolerable. So they project, they deflect, they rewrite entire emotional landscapes to avoid the discomfort of self-examination. And in doing so, they trap you in a psychological maze where you are always seeking approval, always apologizing, always trying to fix what was never yours to fix. And here's the energetic cost. Your body begins to live in a state of chronic dysregulation. Your heart rate increases during conversations. Your breath shortens when conflict arises. Your gut tightens even when nothing is being said. Because deep down, your subconscious knows truth has been replaced by control. And the longer you stay in that dynamic, the more disconnected you become from your own inner compass. You stop trusting yourself. You hesitate to speak your truth. You fear your own emotional reactions. And that's when they've won. Because once you start doubting your own experience, you become dependent on them to define what's real. That dependency is the root of their power. Not love, not connection, control. But your body, your energy field, it remembers the truth. Even if your mind is confused, your heart knows when something is off. That tightness in your chest, that pit in your stomach, that's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's your higher self knocking, whispering, this isn't your fault. This was never your shame to hold. There's a moment when you need comfort, when your soul feels raw, when you reach out with vulnerability, and instead of tenderness, you're met with distance, coldness, silence. And in that moment, something inside you fractures. Because the one person who demands your admiration can't even hold space for your pain. This is the paradox of the narcissist. They crave endless recognition, but offer none in return. They need your energy, but starve you of empathy. Empathy is what makes us human. It's what binds connection and gives safety to love. But in the presence of a narcissist, empathy becomes a threat, because empathy requires seeing you not as a tool, not as a reflection of them, but as a separate being with your own experience, your own needs, your own emotional reality. And that kind of recognition, they refuse to give. They shine when the spotlight is on them, when you're celebrating their victories, their achievements, their drama. But when you're low, when you're grieving, scared, anxious, or even joyful in a way that doesn't center them, they pull away. Sometimes subtly, sometimes cruelly. They change the subject. They diminish your feelings. They accuse you of being too sensitive or dramatic. And what's happening underneath all of this is that they are showing you exactly what they value, themselves. But here's the deeper truth. Over time, being in that emotional vacuum conditions you to minimize your own needs. You stop reaching out. You stop expressing. You begin to suppress parts of yourself just to maintain the peace, just to keep the connection alive. But it's not peace. It's silence. And it's not connection, it's codependence. Your nervous system is built for mutual resonance, for shared understanding, emotional attunement, warmth. When that's denied over and over again, your heart contracts, your voice quiets. And the worst part, you start to believe that maybe you are too much, that maybe your pain is an inconvenience, that maybe your joy, your emotions, your presence somehow takes up too much space. That belief is not born from truth, it's born from emotional starvation. You've been living off crumbs and calling it nourishment, but your soul knows better, because deep within you, beyond the patterns and programming, is a field of wholeness, a field that knows empathy is not earned, it is given freely, lovingly, naturally. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with a subtle suggestion, a raised eyebrow, a quiet comment laced with concern. I don't think they really have your best interests at heart. Your family doesn't understand you like I do. Why do you even tell them everything? And in the beginning, it feels like protection, like intimacy, like someone finally sees the real you. But what's happening is far more calculated. It's not love. It's isolation dressed up as devotion. They want to be your everything, not because they want to love you fully, but because they want to own you completely. And the first step in gaining control over your mind is severing your ties to anything that anchors you in truth. That's why they target your closest relationships. They question your friends' intentions. They sow seeds of doubt about your family. They slowly convince you that no one else understands you like they do. And in your longing to be understood, to be held, to be fully seen, you begin to pull away from the people who actually love you. And you don't even realize it's happening. That's the trap. You think you're making choices. But what's really happening is emotional conditioning. You're learning subconsciously That connection with others creates conflict with them. So to keep the peace, to keep the love, to keep the illusion alive, you start shrinking your world. Phone calls become less frequent. Visits feel heavy. Your laughter, your lightness, your sense of self, it all begins to fade under the weight of their influence. And here's the cost. You become more dependent, not because you're weak, but because you've been systematically disconnected from your power. The support systems that once reminded you of who you are have been pushed to the margins. And all that remains is them, their opinions, their emotions, their reality. And if you dare step out of line, if you speak to someone they don't approve of or make a decision on your own, you're met with guilt, anger, withdrawal. They punish with silence, with disapproval, with emotional coldness, not because you did something wrong, but because you tried to reclaim yourself. This isn't love. Love expands, love liberates. What you're experiencing is possession, a tightening, a caging of the soul. And the more you abandon the people who truly love you, the easier it is for them to rewrite your identity and call it loyalty. You can feel it before you can name it. That sense of fatigue after being with them, not physical tiredness, but a kind of soul exhaustion, as if your energy has been siphoned and replaced with static. You walk away from a simple conversation and feel like you've just survived an emotional storm you didn't see coming. Your mind is foggy, your heart is uneasy, and you can't quite explain why. That's because you've been in the presence of someone who feeds on your confusion. Narcissists thrive in emotional distortion. They don't just lie, they distort reality in such a way that makes you question your perception, your memory, your very sense of truth. You bring something up and suddenly you're too sensitive. You express a boundary and you're accused of being cold or distant. It's a pattern of deflection so seamless, so persistent, that over time you stop trusting what you feel. And here's what happens on a biological level. When your emotional truth is constantly dismissed or distorted, your nervous system begins to dysregulate. Your brain can no longer distinguish between connection and threat. You stay in a low-grade fight-or-flight response, always bracing for their reaction, always scanning for signs of disapproval or shift in tone. This chronic stress isn't just emotional, it's chemical. It alters your hormones, your immune system, your ability to think clearly. You begin living from survival. And that's exactly what they want. Because when you're in survival mode, you're not in creation mode. You're not accessing your intuition, your higher self, your creative power. You're simply reacting. And in that reactive state, they become the authority of your reality. Their moods define your day. Their silence becomes your guilt. Their chaos becomes your normal. But confusion is not love. Exhaustion is not intimacy. If someone consistently leaves you feeling smaller, unsure, and emotionally disoriented, you are not in a relationship. You are in a dynamic of control. And the reason it's so hard to leave, this is because you're weak. It's because your body has been trained to equate instability with connection. It's become a familiar pattern, and familiar feels safe even when it's slowly draining the essence of who you are. But there's a deeper part of you, a part not shaped by trauma or repetition, that knows. It senses, it whispers through the tension in your chest, the heaviness in your spirit, the ache in your heart, that longs to feel whole again. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You are waking up. You are rising. You are remembering who you were before someone tried to rewrite your worth. And the most powerful shift you can make today, not trying to change the narcissist, but changing the version of you who thought you had to accept their love to feel valuable. Your energy is your responsibility. Your healing is your destiny. And your future, your true future, doesn't include anyone who drains the light out of your soul. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below which of these signs hit home for you. And remember, your journey back to self isn't selfish. It's sacred. Subscribe for more soul-healing wisdom, empowerment, and mindset mastery. This is your time. This is your awakening.